She walked into the restaurant in a borrowed dress, and the most dangerous man in the city finally saw the woman who'd been invisible in his home for 3 years. His maid, his blind date, and the one person who could destroy every wall he'd ever built. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we continue, welcome back my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Saturday arrived like a verdict. Brian stood in front of his mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. The charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, the shirt crisp white, the shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked like a man in control. He felt like a fraud. "This is the last time," he muttered to his reflection. Last time. The drive to Bellinate took 20 minutes through streets slick with recent rain. The restaurant was one of the city's finest. Warm lighting, discreet corners, the kind of place where secrets were shared and deals were made. He'd chosen it himself years ago for its privacy and its exits. Always have an exit strategy. The maitre d' recognized him immediately. "Mr. Cross, your table is ready." Brian nodded, following the man through the softly lit space. Saturday night crowd, couples leaning close, the clink of wine glasses, murmured conversations that sounded like contentment. He'd forgotten what that felt like. The table was in the back corner. Perfect. He could see the entrance, position himself with his back to the wall. Old habits. He ordered scotch and waited. 8 o'clock became 8:10. Then 8:15. She wasn't coming. Relief and disappointment warred in his chest, though he couldn't say which one. He should leave. Call Carlos, tell him it was over, return to his empty house and his insomnia and his. The entrance doors opened. Brian looked up reflexively, and the world stuttered to a stop. She wore blue, a dress that skimmed her curves like water, elegant and simple, the color of midnight sky. Her hair fell in dark waves around her shoulders instead of the tight bun he'd. Wait. His mind struggled to reconcile what he was seeing. The woman walking toward him with her head high and terror in her eyes was Bianca. Her name came out strangled. She stopped 3 feet from the table, her hands clutching a small purse so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. "Mr. Cross." Her voice was steady, but he could see her throat working, swallowing fear. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know until I overheard you and Carlos, and by then, you're my blind date. Not a question. A statement of impossible fact. Apparently. She lifted her chin, and something in that gesture, the dignity, the defiance, hit him like a fist to the chest. My cousin set this up. She didn't know who you were, or that I work for you. The matchmaker just matched us. Brian's mind raced. 3 years. She'd worked in his home for 3 years, and he'd barely spoken 20 words to her. He knew she was efficient, quiet, that she left his coffee exactly how he liked it without being asked. He knew she wore the same uniform every day and kept her eyes down when she passed him in the halls. He didn't know her hair curled at the ends. Didn't know she had a small scar above her left eyebrow, or that her eyes weren't just brown but amber in the candlelight, or that she looked like this, breathtaking, terrified, real, in a dress that probably cost a month of her salary. Sit down. The words came out harder than he intended. I don't think. Sit down. He gentled his tone with effort. Please. She sat, perching on the edge of the chair like a bird ready to flee. The waiter appeared, professional smile in place, but Brian waved him away with a sharp gesture. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. This is insane, Brian finally said. His scotch sat untouched, forgotten. You realize how insane this is? Yes. Her hands twisted in her lap. I should go. I'll resign Monday. Find another position. You knew. The accusation escaped before he could stop it. When you overheard Carlos, you knew it was me, and you came anyway. Why? Bianca's eyes flashed, a spark of something fierce breaking through her fear. Because I'm not a coward. That's not an answer. Yes, it is. She leaned forward, and he caught the faint scent of jasmine. Had she always smelled like that? How had he never noticed? For 3 years, I've been invisible in your home, Mr. Cross. 3 years of cleaning up after you, watching you destroy yourself slowly, seeing your pain and your loneliness, and never being allowed to acknowledge it because I'm just the help. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. So when my cousin told me about this date, about a man who was looking for something real, I thought, stupidly, foolishly, maybe it was a chance for someone to see me. Really see me. Not as the maid or the invisible woman in the uniform, but as Bianca Brooks. A person. A woman. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. But clearly that was a mistake. You can't even look at me without seeing the help who scrubs your toilets. That's not fair. Brian stood too, his voice low and dangerous. But dangerous to what, he couldn't say. Isn't it? Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her spine stayed straight. Tell me, Mr. Cross. What's my last name? When's my birthday? Do I have family? Dreams? A life outside your mansion? He opened his mouth, closed it. The silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. She turned to leave. Wait. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, gently, but the contact sent electricity through them both. They both felt it. Both froze. Bianca, wait. She looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Something passed between them, unspoken and terrifying. Why? Her voice was barely a whisper now. Brian released her, but didn't step back. Up close. He could see the slight tremor in her shoulders, the rapid pulse at her throat, the way she was holding herself together through sheer will. He recognized it. He did the same thing every day. Because. He struggled for words. This man who commanded empires with his silences. Because you're right. I've been blind. And I'm. The apology stuck in his throat. He'd spent 20 years never apologizing. I'm sorry. For what? For not seeing me, or for being caught not seeing me? The question was a blade, surgical and precise. I don't know, he admitted. The honesty felt like stepping off a cliff. Maybe both. But sit down. Please. You came here for a date. Let us try this. Properly. Why? She searched his face, looking for lies. You're humiliated. I can see it. The great Brian Cross, matched with his maid. Your world will have a field day with this. Fuck my world. The profanity surprised them both. He never lost composure. Never. You said you wanted someone to see you. I'm asking for a chance to try. You had 3 years of chances. I know. He gestured helplessly at the table, this man who never showed weakness. I know. And I can't undo that. But maybe, he paused, something shifting in his chest, like ice cracking. Maybe I need someone to see me too. The real me. Not the legend or the monster or the bank account. And maybe the only person who could do that is someone who's been watching all along. Bianca stood frozen, torn between rage and hope, dignity and desire. He watched her decide, saw the exact moment she chose to stay. She sat. He sat. The waiter reappeared, sensing the shift. Brian ordered wine, something expensive, something worth celebrating, and then looked at Bianca. Really looked. Brooks, she said quietly. My last name is Brooks. I'll be 35 in March. I have a mother recovering from cancer, a cousin who thinks she knows everything, and I dream of, she paused, vulnerable. I dream of being seen. I see you. The words felt inadequate, but true. I'm seeing you now. Are you? She tilted her head, and something in her expression, challenge mixed with grace, made his heart stutter. Or are you seeing the help in a pretty dress? I'm seeing a woman, he said slowly, carefully, who had the courage to walk into this restaurant knowing exactly who I was, who stood up to me when I was being an ass, who just called me out on 3 years of blindness without flinching. I'm seeing someone strong. Someone real. That's a start. She accepted the wine the waiter poured, her hands steadier now. But here's the truth, Mr. Cross. Brian. She blinked. What? My name is Brian. If we're doing this, whatever this is, you need to stop calling me Mr. Cross like I'm signing your paycheck. You are signing my paycheck. Not right now. Right now, we're two people on a blind date that fate or cosmic irony arranged. He raised his glass. So, Bianca Brooks, tell me something I don't know. Something real. She studied him for a long moment, weighing truth against safety. Then she lifted her own glass. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar, but only on Tuesdays. Other days, you drink it black because you think you don't deserve the sweetness. Her voice was soft but steady. I know you read Rilke when you can't sleep, and you've reread the same passage about loneliness 43 times. I counted the dog-eared page. I know you never finish your meals because eating alone feels like admitting defeat. And I know. She trailed off, but he leaned forward, caught in her gravity. What? I know you're not the monster everyone thinks you are. You're just a man who learned to survive by pretending his heart doesn't exist. The words landed like bullets, precise and devastating. Brian couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This woman he'd passed in hallways, whose name he barely remembered until tonight, had seen him, truly seen him, while he'd been blind. How long? His voice was rough. How long have you been paying attention? Since the first day. A sad smile touched her lips. You interviewed me yourself, 3 years ago. You probably don't remember. You asked me why I wanted the job, and I told you the truth. My mother was sick, I needed the money, and I promised I'd never steal from you. You looked at me then, really looked, and you said, everyone steals something. Time, trust, peace. What matters is whether they give something back. He remembered. God help him, he remembered. You hired me on the spot, she continued. And then you never looked at me again. But I kept looking at you. Kept seeing you. Wondering who you were beneath all that armor. And now? He could barely force the question out. What do you see now? Someone terrified. Her honesty was brutal and kind all at once. Someone who wants this to be real but doesn't believe it can be. Someone who's about to run because staying means being vulnerable, and you've forgotten how to do that. Brian's throat tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to end this before it began, to retreat into the safety of his empty mansion and his controlled life. But he didn't move. I should run, he admitted. Everything about this is wrong. You work for me. The optics alone, he stopped, seeing her expression shudder. That came out wrong. No. It came out honest. She set down her glass with careful precision. You're right. This is impossible. I should go. Bianca. But she was already standing, and this time he didn't reach for her. He let her gather her dignity and turn toward the door, watched her walk away with her head high and her heart breaking. He could see it in the set of her shoulders. She made it 5 steps before he spoke. My father used to say that power was the ability to make people disappear. His voice carried across the restaurant, low but clear. He meant it literally. Making problems go away, eliminating threats. But I learned a different truth. Real power is making yourself disappear. Your feelings, your needs, your humanity. That's how you survive. Bianca stopped but didn't turn around. You asked what I see now, Brian continued, standing slowly. I see someone who scares me more than any enemy I've ever faced. Because you don't want my money or my connections or my protection. You want me. The real me. And I don't know if there's anything real left to give. She turned then, slowly, and the tears on her cheeks caught the candlelight like diamonds. Then maybe, she said quietly, we both need to stop disappearing. The restaurant hummed around them. Conversations, laughter, the clink of silverware. But in that moment, they existed in a bubble of terrifying possibility. Brian crossed the space between them in 3 strides. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to be the man who deserves a woman like you. Neither do I, she whispered. Know how to be with a man like you. Then maybe we figure it out together. This is insane. You said that already. It bears repeating. But she was smiling now, tremulous and real. What happens Monday? When I show up to clean your house. We'll figure that out too. He offered his hand, formal and absurd and perfect. But right now, Bianca Brooks, would you give me the honor of having dinner with me? A real dinner. Where I ask you questions and listen to your answers and try very hard not to be the blind fool I've been for 3 years. She looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she placed hers in it, warm and steady and brave. One condition, she said. Anything. You stop calling this insane. Because maybe it is. But maybe it's also the most honest thing either of us has done in years. Brian felt something crack open in his chest. Something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it existed. Deal. They returned to the table, still holding hands, neither quite willing to let go yet. And as they sat down, as Brian asked about her mother and Bianca asked about his insomnia, as they began the fragile work of truly seeing each other, a photographer outside the restaurant's window captured them through the glass. The photo would make the tabloids by morning. But in that moment, neither of them cared about the storm that was coming. They were too busy learning each other's real names. The photograph hit the internet before their entrees arrived. Brian's phone buzzed first, a sharp vibration that shattered the fragile bubble they'd built. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened imperceptibly. But Bianca had spent 3 years reading his micro-expressions. She saw the shift. What is it? Nothing. He silenced the phone, turning it face down on the table. Tell me more about your mother's recovery. But the damage was done. The magic had cracked, letting reality seep in. Bianca's own phone buzzed next. Then again. And again. She pulled it from her purse with trembling fingers, and her face went pale as she scrolled through the messages. Shanice. Oh my God, Bianca, is that you? With Brian Cross? Her mother. Baby, call me. Nah. Unknown numbers. Social media notifications exploding. And the photo, grainy but unmistakable, of her and Brian holding hands across the table, her tears visible, his expression unguarded in a way the world never saw. The headline read, Mafia boss Brian Cross spotted with mystery woman. Sources say she's his maid. Oh God. Bianca's voice was barely audible. Oh God, they know. Brian reached across the table, but she pulled back instinctively. The withdrawal was small, but it hit him like a slap. Bianca. How did they? She was scrolling frantically now, reading comment after vicious comment. Her hands shook. They're saying such horrible things. He didn't need to see her screen to know. He'd lived in this world long enough to imagine. Gold digger. Social climber. He's slumming. She's using him. How desperate must he be? And worse. So much worse. Comments about her race, her class, her worth. The internet was showing its ugliest face. We need to leave. Brian signaled for the check, his voice clipped and professional, the tone he used to end negotiations. Now. I need to. Bianca couldn't finish the sentence. She just stood abruptly, knocking her wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. They moved through the restaurant in a blur. Brian's hand hovered at the small of her back but didn't quite touch. Protective but uncertain. The other diners watched, whispers following them like smoke. Someone raised a phone to take another photo. Brian's glare stopped them cold. Outside, the rain had started again, cold and relentless. Brian's car was waiting. A black sedan, anonymous and armored. His driver, Thomas, opened the door with practiced discretion, his expression carefully neutral. "Where to, sir?" Brian looked at Bianca, who stood on the curb with rain soaking into her beautiful borrowed dress, her phone still buzzing with notifications she couldn't stop checking. "I'll catch a cab," she said, not meeting his eyes. This was a mistake. "Get in the car, Mr. Cross." "Brian." His voice was sharper than he intended. "And get in the car, Bianca. I'm not leaving you alone in this. You don't have a choice." She finally looked up, and her eyes were fierce despite the tears mixing with rain. "This is my life you're about to destroy. My reputation. My privacy. Everything I've worked for. Gone. Because I was stupid enough to think." She stopped, biting off the words. "Think what?" He stepped closer, rain plastering his expensive suit to his frame. "Neither of them cared. That someone like you could actually see someone like me as anything more than..." Her voice broke. "I'm trending on Twitter. Brian. Trending. Do you understand what that means? By tomorrow, my face will be everywhere. They'll find my mother, my cousin. They'll dig into every mistake I've ever made and put it online for the world to judge. I can protect you. From the internet? From the court of public opinion." She laughed, bitter and sharp. "You can't even protect yourself. They're calling you desperate. Pathetic. Saying you're having a midlife crisis with the help." Each word landed like a physical blow, but Brian's expression hardened. "I don't care what they say about me." "Well, I care what they say about me." The anger in her voice surprised them both. "I care that I'm being reduced to a punchline. That people are questioning my integrity, my character, my worth. All because I had dinner with you. Then what do you want me to do?" His control was slipping, frustration bleeding through. "You want me to release a statement? Deny it? Pretend this dinner never happened?" "I don't know." She pressed her hands to her face, and he could see her shoulders shaking. "I just know that it's impossible. It was always impossible. We were insane to think otherwise. You said not to call it insane. I was wrong." She lowered her hands, and the defeat in her expression gutted him. "Go home, Mr. Cross. Go back to your mansion and your empire and your carefully controlled life. I'll resign on Monday. We'll both pretend this never happened." "Bianca. Please." The word was a whisper. "Please just let me go." Thomas cleared his throat awkwardly. "Sir, there are photographers coming." Brian turned and saw them. 3 men with cameras, running toward them through the rain. In seconds, they'd be surrounded. The feeding frenzy had begun. He made a choice. "Get in the car. Both of you." He grabbed Bianca's hand, not asking this time, and pulled her into the back seat, sliding in after her. "Thomas. Drive. I don't care where, just drive." The door slammed shut, muffling the shouts of the photographers. The car pulled away from the curb, leaving camera flashes and chaos in its wake. Inside, the silence was deafening. Bianca sat as far from him as the seat allowed, staring out the window at the rain-soaked city sliding past. Her phone continued its relentless buzzing. Finally, she powered it off completely and dropped it in her lap like something contaminated. "You can't just kidnap me every time things get difficult," she said to the window. "I didn't kidnap you. I removed us from an untenable situation. Same thing when you're you." The accusation hung between them. Brian loosened his tie. Suddenly the expensive fabric felt like a noose. "You're right," he said quietly. "About all of it. This is impossible. The optics are a nightmare. My world will eat you alive, and yours will never forgive you for being associated with me." We should end this now before it gets worse. Good. But she didn't sound relieved. She sounded devastated. Except. He paused, the words fighting their way out. Except I can't stop thinking about what you said in the restaurant. About both of us disappearing. About finally being seen. That was before the world decided to weigh in. The world always weighs in, Bianca. That's what the world does. The question is whether we let them decide for us. She turned to face him finally, and in the dim light of the car's interior, he could see the war raging behind her eyes. Easy for you to say. You're Brian Cross. You've been judged and talked about your entire life. You're used to it. I'm not. I'm just, she gestured helplessly at herself. I'm just me. Regular. Invisible. Or I was until tonight. You were never invisible. I was just blind. Stop. Her voice cracked. Stop saying things like that. It makes this harder. Good. It should be hard. Anything worth having should be. Is that what I am to you? Something to have? Another acquisition for your collection. The words stung because they touched his deepest fear, that he didn't know how to want something without trying to own it. No. He forced himself to meet her eyes. You're the first thing in 20 years that I want without knowing how to have. And it terrifies me. Bianca's breath hitched. Brian. Sir. Thomas's voice came through the intercom. We have a problem. Brian looked up and his blood ran cold. 3 cars were following them. Not just paparazzi now, but something worse. He recognized the vehicles. Recognized the threat. They're mine, he said flatly. My people. Checking on me. Why would they? Bianca's eyes widened as understanding hit. They think I'm a threat. Don't they? They think I'm using you, or blackmailing you, or... They're protective. It was a massive understatement. His organization didn't take kindly to unknown variables getting close to their leader. Thomas, take us to the safe house in Riverside. The small one. Sir, are you certain? Now. The car changed direction, and the 3 vehicles followed at a discreet but menacing distance. Bianca had gone very still. What happens when we get there? We wait out the storm. Both storms. The paparazzi and my people. By morning, I'll have contained the situation. Contained. She repeated the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what I am now? A situation to contain? That's not what I meant. Isn't it? She turned on him, and there was fire in her eyes now, burning through the fear. You're already trying to control this. Control me. Deciding where we go, what we do, how we handle things. Just like you control everything else in your life. I'm trying to protect you. I didn't ask for your protection. I asked for you to see me. Her voice rose. But you can't separate those things, can you? You can't just be with someone. You have to manage them, shelter them, keep them in controlled environments where you dictate the terms. The accusation hit too close to home. Brian's hands clenched into fists against his thighs. What do you want from me, Bianca? You want me to pretend I'm not who I am? That I don't have enemies who'd hurt you to get to me? That the world isn't about to crucify both of us for having dinner together? I want you to ask what I want. She was crying again, angry tears this time. Not tell me. Not decide for me. Ask me like I'm your equal, not your employee or your problem to solve. The car fell silent except for the rain hammering against the roof and the steady swish of windshield wipers. Brian realized he was shaking. From anger or fear or something else entirely, he couldn't tell. You're right. The admission cost him. You're absolutely right. He struggled for the words. I don't know how to do this. Any of this. I've spent so long being in control that I don't know how to just be. Then learn. Her voice softened slightly, but the steel remained. Or let me go. Because I won't be another thing you control, Brian. I won't be managed or contained or protected into invisibility again. What do you want? He forced himself to ask. Right now, in this moment, what do you want? She looked at him for a long time, really looked, the way she'd been doing for 3 years without him knowing. I want to go home, she finally said. To my apartment. My space. Where I can think without you deciding what's best for me. And I want, she paused, vulnerable again. I want to know if this is real, or if you just can't stand losing control of something you suddenly noticed. The question carved him open. It's real. His voice was barely above a whisper. I don't know what it is yet, but it's real. And it scares me more than anything I've ever faced. Me too. She wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, a gesture so unguarded it made his chest ache. So take me home. Please. Let me have tonight to process this. To decide if I'm brave enough to try. What would you risk for a chance at real love? Tell us in the comments. Brian nodded slowly, then leaned forward to the intercom. Thomas. Change of plans. Take us to Ms. Brooks's address. Sir, the cars. Let them follow. They'll stand down when they see she's not a threat. Am I? Bianca asked quietly. Not a threat. He looked at her, really looked, the way he should have been doing for 3 years, and told her the devastating truth. You're the biggest threat I've ever faced. Because you make me want things I swore I'd never want again. She didn't respond, just turned back to the window, and they rode the rest of the way in silence thick with everything they couldn't say. When they finally pulled up to her building, a modest 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood that had seen better days, the contrast to his world was stark and undeniable. Bianca reached for the door handle, then paused. If I decide to try this, she said without looking at him, it has to be on equal ground. No more boss and employee. No more you making decisions for me. No more hiding. Agreed. I mean it, Brian. I won't be your secret. I won't be your shame. You could never be either of those things. She finally looked at him, searching his face for lies. Prove it. Then she was gone, stepping out into the rain and walking toward her building without looking back. He watched until she disappeared through the door, then watched her light turn on in a 3rd-floor window. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Sir. Thomas's voice was carefully neutral. Where to? Brian pulled out his phone. 63 missed calls. 47 texts. News alerts about him and Bianca multiplying by the second. His world was imploding, and he had to decide, contain it or let it burn. Home, he finally said. And call a meeting for tomorrow morning. Everyone. I need to address this head-on. Because Bianca was right. He couldn't control this. Couldn't manage it into submission. But he could choose her. Choose truth over comfort. Choose courage over control. If she'd have him. The question was, after tonight, would she? Sunday morning arrived with the subtlety of a hurricane. Brian hadn't slept. He'd spent the night in his study, monitoring the fallout, watching his phone light up with demands for explanations. His board wanted answers. His associates wanted damage control. The media wanted blood. At 6 a.m., his phone rang with a number he recognized immediately. His aunt, the matchmaker who'd started this whole cascade. Tia Marisol. He answered, resigned. Me, Joe. Her voice was warm and unapologetic. I see my matchmaking worked. Your matchmaking caused a media circus. No, your secrecy caused that. Love isn't meant to hide in shadows. She paused, and he could hear her sipping coffee. Cuban, strong enough to strip paint. Tell me, did you see her? Really see her? Brian closed his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up. Yes. And it's complicated. Love always is. But complicated doesn't mean impossible, Brian. It means worth fighting for. She softened her tone. That girl, Bianca. Her cousin came to me specifically. Said she had someone special who deserved someone special. When I looked into you both, I saw two people hiding from the world in different ways. I thought maybe you could stop hiding together. You should have told us. If I had, would you have gone? The silence was answer enough. Exactly. Marisol sighed. Now stop managing the situation and go be with her. The rest will sort itself out. She hung up before he could argue. Brian stared at his phone, then at the bottle of scotch he'd opened but not touched. He'd built an empire on calculated decisions, on risk assessment and strategic planning. But there was no strategy for this. His phone buzzed again. Carlos, sending a news link. The article was worse than he'd imagined. They'd found everything. Bianca's employment records, her mother's medical bills, even photos of her neighborhood. The comments section was a war zone of classism, racism, and cruelty. And through it all, speculation. Was she blackmailing him? Was this a publicity stunt? How long had the affair been going on? Brian threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack but kept working, reinforced, like everything in his life. He needed to see her. Needed to. His phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Mr. Cross. A woman's voice, unfamiliar and urgent. This is Rebecca Chen. I'm a nurse at Mercy General. I'm calling about Bianca Brooks. You're listed as her emergency contact. His blood turned to ice. What happened? She's okay, but there was an incident at her apartment complex early this morning. Some photographers got aggressive, and she fell trying to get away. Possible concussion, some bruising. She's stable but... Brian was already moving, grabbing his keys, his jacket. I'm on my way. Don't let anyone near her. No press, no visitors except family. Sir, I should mention, her apartment was broken into. The police are here, but she's refusing to give a statement until... Until what? The nurse hesitated. Until she knows you're safe. She keeps asking if they went after you too. Something in Brian's chest cracked wider. He made the drive in 15 minutes. A trip that should have taken 30. Thomas drove with professional efficiency while Brian made calls, to his head of security, to his lawyers, to Carlos with instructions to lock down everything. But underneath the commands and the planning, one thought repeated like a prayer. Please let her be okay. Please. Mercy General was a madhouse. Photographers lined the entrance until Brian's security team cleared a path. He moved through the hospital like a storm, nurses and orderlies stepping aside, until he reached the private room they'd moved her to. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her rain-ruined blue dress from last night, now torn at the shoulder. A butterfly bandage covered a cut above her eyebrow. Bruises were forming on her arms, defensive wounds. His trained eye recognized immediately. When she saw him, her face crumpled. Bianca! He crossed to her in 3 strides, and she stood, and suddenly she was in his arms, shaking. I'm sorry, she whispered against his chest. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean for... Stop. He held her carefully, aware of her injuries, aware of how fragile she felt despite her strength. This isn't your fault. They were waiting. Outside my building. Taking pictures, yelling questions. One of them grabbed my arm, tried to force me to talk, and I pulled away and... She was trembling. The stairs. I fell down the stairs trying to get back inside. Rage, pure and cold, flooded through him. Which photographer? Brian, no. Which one, Bianca? She pulled back to look at him, and what she saw in his face made her grab his arms. No. You can't. I won't let you become that person because of me. Promise me. They hurt you. And you'll hurt them and it'll make everything worse, and I'll lose you to that darkness, and... Her voice broke. Please. Promise me. The plea in her eyes was more powerful than any threat. Brian forced himself to breathe, to think past the violence that came so naturally. Okay, he finally said. Okay. But I'm pressing charges. Civil suit. And they'll never work in this city again. That I can live with. She sagged slightly, and he guided her back to sit on the bed. They broke into my apartment. Looking for evidence of our affair, I guess. Trashed the place. The landlord called the police, but... She laughed, bitter. What can they really do? It's not like they stole anything valuable. I don't own anything valuable. You're valuable. The words came out fierce. You're the most valuable thing in my world right now, and they hurt you and I. He stopped. The emotions too big, too raw. A knock at the door interrupted them. A police officer entered, middle-aged and tired-looking, followed by a young woman in a social worker's badge. Ms. Brooks? I'm Officer Martinez. We need to ask you some questions about the break-in, and about your relationship with Mr. Cross. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Given the nature of your employment and the circumstances, we need to rule out any coercion or... Coercion. Bianca's spine straightened despite her injuries. You think he's forcing me? We have to ask, ma'am. The power dynamic. The power dynamic, Bianca interrupted, is complicated. But it's not coercion. I went on that date willingly. I stayed willingly. Everything that's happened has been my choice. Even falling down the stairs running from photographers? The social worker's voice was gentle but pointed. That wasn't his fault. But it's connected to him. Ms. Brooks, we're trying to help you. If you're feeling pressured. I'm not. Bianca looked at Brian, then back at the officer. I'm feeling harassed by the media. I'm feeling violated by whoever broke into my home. But I'm not a victim of Brian Cross. The officer exchanged glances with the social worker, clearly unconvinced. Ms. Brooks, your apartment isn't safe right now, the social worker said. We can arrange temporary housing, a shelter. No. Brian's voice cut through the room. She'll stay with me. Full security. Separate quarters if she wants. But she's not going to a shelter. Mr. Cross, that's highly inappropriate given. Given what? That she works for me? She's not going back to work. Consider this her resignation, effective immediately, with 6 months severance. He looked at Bianca. That is, if you want to resign. You can't just fire me to make this easier, Bianca said. I'm not firing you. I'm offering you a choice. No strings. Stay or go, the severance is yours either way. Officer Martinez looked between them, clearly trying to determine if this was romantic or predatory. Ms. Brooks, do you want to press charges against Mr. Cross for anything? Harassment, assault, coercion. No, Bianca said firmly. I want to press charges against whoever broke into my home and whoever assaulted me on those stairs. Brian didn't do either of those things. The officer nodded slowly. All right. We'll need a formal statement. But Miss Brooks, take my card. If anything changes, if you feel unsafe, I'll call. She took the card, her hand steady now. Thank you. After they left, silence filled the room like a third presence. You can't just fire me, Bianca repeated, quieter now. I can and I did. You were right last night. We can't be employer and employee anymore. Not if this. He gestured between them, helpless. Not if we're going to try. Are we? Trying. She touched the bandage on her forehead, wincing. Because it seems like maybe the universe is telling us this is a terrible idea. The universe is always telling me things are terrible ideas. I built an empire anyway. He pulled up a chair, sitting so they were eye level. But I meant what I said. Your choice. Bianca. You want to walk away, I'll make sure you're safe and protected. You want to try. His voice roughened. Then I'm all in. No more half measures. What does all in look like for you? Honestly? I don't know. I've never been all in with anyone. He ran a hand through his hair, disheveled and human in a way she'd never seen. But I know I can't go back to not seeing you. Can't unsee what I saw last night. Can't pretend you're invisible again. My apartment's destroyed. My face is all over the internet. People are sending me death threats on social media. Yes, I turned my phone back on, stupid I know, and your world thinks I'm a gold digger, and mine thinks I'm a traitor for even considering being with you. Her voice shook. This is already a disaster, Brian. I know. So why are we even talking about trying? He leaned forward, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed anyone. Because yesterday, for 2 hours in that restaurant, I felt alive for the first time in 20 years. Because you know my coffee order and the passages I reread and the fact that I'm slowly disappearing, and you stayed anyway. Because... He paused, the words catching. Because I think I've been waiting for you to see me, even when I didn't know it. Bianca's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. What's not fair? Saying things like that when I'm trying to be logical. Trying to make the smart choice. And what's the smart choice? Walking away. Protecting myself. Going back to being invisible. She wiped at her tears, frustrated. But I don't want to. I don't want to disappear again. Even if staying means. Thunder cracked outside. Loud and close. The hospital lights flickered. A nurse stuck her head in. Storm's getting worse. They're saying flash flood warnings for the whole county. Anyone who can stay put should stay put. Perfect. Brian almost laughed at the timing. You can't drive in this, Bianca said, looking at the window where rain lashed the glass in sheets. And I can't go home to my apartment anyway. So we're stuck. Seems to be our theme. But she was almost smiling. The universe keeps forcing us into proximity. Maybe the universe knows something we don't. Or maybe it just has a cruel sense of humor. Another rumble of thunder. This one shaking the windows. The lights flickered again and stayed dim. Emergency power kicking in. The nurse returned, apologetic. I'm sorry, but we need this room for incoming trauma cases. The flooding's causing accidents. Ms. Brooks, you're clear to leave medically, but... She'll come with me, Brian said. I have a property 20 minutes from here. A cabin, private, secure. We can wait out the storm there. Bianca raised an eyebrow. Another safe house? A cabin I bought years ago when I needed somewhere quiet to think. No one knows about it except Thomas and Carlos. No security team, no staff. Just, he shrugged, peace. Or the closest thing I've ever found to it. And you want me to go there with you? While the city floods and the media hunts us and everything falls apart. I want you to be safe. The rest. He stood offering his hand. The rest we'll figure out. Together. If you want. Bianca looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she placed hers in it, just like she had at the restaurant. This is crazy, she said. You're not supposed to call it crazy, remember? I'm making an exception. But she squeezed his hand. Let's go. The cabin sat at the end of a gravel road that barely qualified as a path, surrounded by pine trees that swayed violently in the storm. It was small, maybe 1,000 square feet, built from weathered wood that had seen decades of seasons. Nothing like Brian's mansion. Nothing like the world expected from him. This is yours, Bianca asked as Thomas pulled up to the covered porch. Hard to believe? Very. But her voice held wonder, not judgment. It's normal. That was the point. Brian climbed out, then came around to help her. She was still unsteady from the fall, though she tried to hide it. I bought it 15 years ago, after my father died. Needed somewhere that wasn't connected to him. to any of it. Thomas retrieved a bag from the trunk, emergency supplies Brian always kept prepared, and handed it to him with a knowing look. I'll be back tomorrow morning, sir. Unless you need. We're fine. Go home to Maria before the roads get worse. Thomas nodded, then surprised them both by addressing Bianca directly. Ma'am, I've driven Mr. Cross for 8 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Whatever you two decide, I hope you know that. Then he was gone, the car disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness, leaving them alone. Brian unlocked the door, an actual key, not a security system, and ushered Bianca inside. The interior was sparse but comfortable. A stone fireplace, worn leather furniture, bookshelves lining every wall, a small kitchen visible through an archway. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. How long since you've been here? Bianca asked, running a finger along the mantel. 2 years. Maybe 3. He set down the bag, suddenly feeling exposed in a way the restaurant hadn't achieved. This place was private. Real. I kept meaning to come back, but you were too busy disappearing in other ways. He looked at her sharply, but there was no accusation in her expression. Just understanding. Yeah, he admitted. Something like that. Bianca moved through the space slowly, taking in details. She paused at a bookshelf, pulling out a worn copy of Rilke's Letters to a Young Poet, the same one from his nightstand at the mansion. You have 2 copies, she observed. One for show. One that's real. He started building a fire, needing something to do with his hands. The one at the mansion is pristine. This one I've actually read until the spine broke. She opened it, and dozens of annotations covered the margins, his handwriting raw and searching. She read one aloud. We need in love to practice only this, letting each other go. For holding on comes easily. We do not need to learn it. The words hung in the air between them. Is that what you believe? She asked softly. I don't know what I believe anymore. The fire caught, flames beginning to push back the cold. I used to think that was the answer. Never hold on, never need, never let anyone close enough to leave. But. He turned to face her. But I'm starting to think that maybe the brave thing isn't letting go. Maybe it's holding on even when you're terrified. Bianca set the book down carefully, like it was something sacred. Tell me about her. Who? The woman in the photograph. The one you keep face down in your study. Brian felt his chest tighten. You noticed that. I notice everything about you. Remember. She moved to the couch, sitting down with a wince. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But I think I need to know what I'm walking into. What ghosts I'm competing with. He should deflect. Should change the subject. Should maintain the walls that had protected him for so long. Instead, he sat beside her, staring into the fire. Her name was Victoria. The words felt like broken glass in his throat. We were engaged 12 years ago. I was 30, stupid. Thought I was invincible. Thought love was something I could control like everything else. What happened? I happened. He forced himself to continue. My world happened. She was a lawyer, came from old money, seemed to understand what being with me meant. But understanding and living it are different things. The threat started small. Anonymous notes, strange cars outside her office. I increased security, told her it was handled. His hands clenched. Then one night, someone broke into her apartment while I was there. 3 men, armed, sent by a rival who wanted to send me a message. I fought them off, barely. But Victoria. His voice cracked. She looked at me afterward, covered in blood that wasn't mine, and I saw it. The moment she realized what I really was. Not a businessman. Not a leader. A killer. Bianca's hand found his warm and steady. She left the next morning. Didn't say goodbye, just left the ring on the kitchen counter with a note. I can't love someone I'm afraid of. And she was right. I was a monster pretending to be a man. I let her go because I thought. He finally looked at Bianca. I thought that was mercy. That everyone I loved would either become like me or leave me. So I stopped trying. Until now, Bianca whispered. Until you walked into that restaurant and I realized I'd been seeing you all along. Just not letting myself admit it. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, the storm raging outside. My turn, Bianca asked quietly. You don't have to. Fair's fair. She took a breath, steadying herself. You want to know why I became a maid? The real reason. You said your mother. That's part of it. But not all. She pulled her hand from his, wrapping her arms around herself. 7 years ago, I was in grad school. Getting my MBA, working 2 jobs to pay for it, dreaming of a sad smile. It doesn't matter what I was dreaming. Point is, I was engaged too. To a man named Derek. He was everything I thought I wanted. Ambitious, charming, from a good family. Brian felt something cold settle in his stomach. Then my mother got sick. Stage 3 breast cancer. The treatments weren't covered by her insurance. She'd let it lapse trying to help me with tuition. Suddenly I had a choice. Finish school or save my mother. She met his eyes. It wasn't really a choice. I dropped out, took out loans, got a second mortgage on her house. And Derek. Derek said he understood. Said we'd get through it together. Then, her voice hardened. Then he sat me down and explained that his family had expectations. That marrying someone with that kind of debt, that kind of baggage, wouldn't be appropriate for his image. He offered me money, called it a loan. But we both knew what it really was. Payment to go away quietly. Jesus, Bianca. I threw it in his face. Told him to get out. And then She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I fell apart. Lost the apartment because I couldn't pay rent. Moved back in with my mother while she went through chemo. Watched her suffer and knew it was my fault for not having insurance, for not being successful enough, for not. Stop. Brian's voice was firm. None of that was your fault. Wasn't it? I made choices. I chose school over security. Chose pride over Derek's money. Chose. She shook her head. I became a maid because it was the only job I could get that paid enough to cover the medical bills and didn't require a degree I didn't finish. And I stayed a maid because somewhere along the way, I forgot I was supposed to want more. Until I watched you. She turned to face him fully. Until I saw a man with everything who had nothing. Who was disappearing just like me. And I thought. Her voice broke. I thought maybe if I could see you, really see you, then maybe someone could see me too. Brian felt something shift in his chest, like a lock finally opening. I see you, he said roughly. God, Bianca, I see you. And I'm so sorry it took me so long. Why? She whispered. Why do you see me now? What changed? You demanded to be seen. He reached out, cupping her face gently, mindful of her injuries. You walked into that restaurant terrified and brave, and you didn't let me look away. You made me choose. Stay blind or open my eyes. And once I saw you, he swallowed hard. I can't unsee you. Don't want to. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm scared, Brian. Me too. What if this doesn't work? What if we're too different, too damaged too? Then we'll be damaged together. He brushed away her tears with his thumb. But I think maybe we've both been waiting for someone brave enough to see our wounds and not run. Someone who knows what it costs to survive and chooses to live anyway. Bianca let out a shaky breath, then leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. They stayed like that, breathing together, as the fire warmed the room and the storm raged outside. Tell me something else, she said after a long moment. Something you've never told anyone. Brian thought about deflecting, but she'd given him her truth. She deserved his. Sometimes, he said quietly, I dream about the man I could have been. If my father hadn't raised me in his world. If I'd made different choices. I dream about having a normal job, a normal life. Coming home to someone who loves me not despite what I am, but because of who I am. And then I wake up, and remember that man doesn't exist. He died a long time ago, if he ever lived at all. What if he didn't die? Bianca pulled back to look at him. What if he's just been waiting for permission to exist? It's not that simple. Isn't it? She touched his face, the gesture tender and devastating. You're not your father, Brian. You're not the things you've done or the empire you've built. You're the man who bought a cabin to remember peace. Who reads poetry about loneliness. Who's so afraid of being seen that you've spent 20 years invisible. That's not. It is. Her voice was gentle but unyielding. You think you're the only one who sees? I've watched you for 3 years. I know you donated anonymously to the hospital where my mother was treated. I recognized your assistant's signature on the paperwork. I know you tip every service worker triple and never take credit. I know you read stories to the housekeeper's grandchildren when they visit, thinking no one notices. Brian stared at her, stunned. How did you? Because I pay attention. Because I see all of you, the violence and the kindness, the control and the vulnerability. And I'm not afraid of you, Brian. I'm afraid of this thing between us, yes. But not of you. The words broke something open in him. He pulled her close, careful of her injuries, and held her like she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. I don't know how to be what you need, he confessed into her hair. I don't need you to be anything but real. She wrapped her arms around him, anchoring them both. No more armor. No more disappearing. Just be here. With me. For as long as this lasts. And if I fail? If I hurt you or? Then we'll deal with it. Together. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But Brian, you have to let me in. All the way. No more safe houses and controlled environments and managing the situation. If we do this, we do it as equals. Messy and real and terrifying. He searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt, any hint that she didn't understand what she was asking. But all he saw was courage and clarity and the same desperate hope he felt. Okay, he breathed. Okay. Equal ground. No more walls. Promise. I promise. And he meant it, even though it scared him more than anything he'd ever faced. Bianca smiled then, a real smile, soft and genuine, and it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Good. Then let's start with something simple. She settled back against the couch, pulling him with her. Tell me about this cabin. Why here? Why this place? So he told her. About driving aimlessly after his father's funeral, trying to outrun grief and rage. About seeing the for sale sign on this property and stopping on impulse. About the old man who'd owned it, who'd asked Brian one question. You running from something or toward something? I said I didn't know, Brian admitted. And he said, this place is for people finding their way back to themselves. If that's you, it's yours. Was it? Were you finding your way back? No. But I wanted to believe I could. He looked around the cabin, seeing it through new eyes. I haven't been back because I gave up on that. On the idea that I could be anything other than what my father made me. And now? He looked at her, at this woman who'd cleaned his house and witnessed his loneliness and refused to stay invisible. At this woman who was brave enough to demand he be brave too. Now, he said slowly, I'm starting to think maybe it's not too late. Maybe I can find my way back. If. He stopped, vulnerable. If you'll help me. Have you ever had to choose between who you were and who you could become? Share your story below. I will, Bianca promised. But only if you help me too. Help me remember I'm more than what I settled for. That I'm brave enough to want more. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss, soft and tentative and tasting of salt and hope. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the cabin, two people who'd been invisible for too long finally began to see each other clearly. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. They talked through the night. Not about the media storm or the broken apartment or the impossible situation they'd created. They talked about everything else, the small, precious things people share when they're learning to trust. Brian made coffee in the cabin's tiny kitchen, and Bianca laughed when he added 1 sugar, just like Tuesdays at the mansion. "You're consistent," she teased, wrapped in a blanket on the couch. "Apparently, I'm predictable." "No. You're knowable. There's a difference." She accepted the mug, their fingers brushing. The touch still sent electricity between them. Predictable is boring. Knowable is intimate. The word hung between them, weighted with possibility. Brian sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Through the window, dawn was beginning to break, the storm finally easing. Everything was painted in shades of gray and gold. "Tell me something happy," he said suddenly. "Something from before everything got complicated." Bianca thought for a moment, a smile playing at her lips. "When I was 8, my mother taught me to dance. Not formal dancing, just moving to Motown in our kitchen while we made Sunday breakfast. She'd spin me around, and for those moments, nothing else existed. Just music and laughter and feeling loved." "Does she still dance?" "After the cancer? Sometimes. On good days." Bianca's expression softened with memory. "She's stronger than anyone I know. Lost her husband, fought disease, watched me struggle, but she never lost her joy. She taught me that survival isn't enough. You have to find reasons to celebrate being alive." Brian felt something ache in his chest. "I can't remember the last time I celebrated anything." "Then we'll have to change that." She set down her coffee and stood, extending her hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "So, make some." He stared at her, this woman with bruises on her arms and a bandage on her forehead, who'd lost so much and still chose joy. How could he refuse? He took her hand and stood. Bianca hummed softly, some melody he didn't recognize, and began to sway. Brian followed awkwardly, feeling ridiculous and young and more alive than he had in decades. "You're terrible at this," she laughed, but without cruelty. "I've been to 1,000 formal events. I know how to waltz. This isn't waltzing. This is just being." She stepped closer, placing his hand on her waist, her head against his chest. "Feel the rhythm. Stop thinking so much." So he tried. Let go of control, let go of planning, and just moved with her in the quiet cabin as morning light filtered through the windows. She hummed, he held her, and for those perfect moments, the world outside didn't exist. "See," she whispered. "You're not so bad when you stop trying to control everything. You're a terrible influence." "Good. You need one." They swayed in silence for a while, and Brian felt something he couldn't name. Peace, maybe, or hope, or the dangerous beginning of something that felt like healing. "Bianca." His voice was rough. Thank you." She pulled back to look at him, confused. "For what?" "For seeing me. For staying. For—" He struggled for words. "For dancing with me when I forgot how." Her eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "You're welcome." "But Brian." "Yeah. Thank you for finally looking. For letting me in. For being brave enough to try." He kissed her then, softly, reverently, like she was something precious he might break. She kissed him back, and it felt like a promise neither of them knew how to keep but were willing to try. When they finally pulled apart, the sun had fully risen, painting the cabin in warm light. "We should probably sleep," Bianca said, though neither of them moved. "Probably. The world's going to be waiting when we go back." "I know." This, she gestured between them. This fragile thing we're building. It's going to get tested. Hard. I know that too. He cupped her face gently. But for now, can we just have this? This moment, this morning, this peace? Before everything gets complicated again. She nodded, and they settled on the couch together, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The fire had burned down to embers, but they were warm enough. "Brian?" she murmured, already half asleep. I'm glad it was you. At that restaurant. Even with everything that's happened. I'm glad." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, careful of her injury. "Me too." They slept as morning turned to afternoon, tangled together on the worn couch, two people who'd been invisible learning to exist in the light. The peace lasted exactly 18 hours. Brian's phone, which he'd turned off at the cabin, came back to life when they returned to the city Monday afternoon. The notifications were endless, but one message from Carlos demanded immediate attention. "Emergency meeting. Everyone knows. Get here now." "I have to go," Brian said, though everything in him wanted to stay with Bianca, keep her in that bubble where the world couldn't touch them. "I know." She was pale but determined. "I need to check on my mother anyway. See what's salvageable from the apartment. Let me send security." "Brian." She touched his face. "Equal ground, remember? I can handle this. At least take Thomas. Please. For my peace of mind." She nodded, and they parted at his estate. Her to face her shattered life, him to face his waiting empire. The meeting was brutal. His board sat around the conference table like a panel of judges. Carlos looked exhausted. His lawyer, Patricia Chen, wore an expression that promised nothing good. "Gentlemen." Brian took his seat at the head of the table, projecting control he didn't feel. "Let's hear it." "You're sleeping with your maid," Victor Santos, his oldest board member, said flatly. "The media's having a field day. Our investors are nervous. And the feds," he slid a folder across the table. "They're asking questions about whether you've been coerced or compromised." "That's insane." "Is it?" Patricia leaned forward. "Brian, this looks bad. Really bad. A powerful man, a vulnerable employee, a secret relationship." "It's not secret, and she's not vulnerable. She makes $35,000 a year cleaning your house." Victor's voice rose. "She has medical debt, a sick mother, and now her face is plastered everywhere as your mistress. How is that not vulnerable?" Brian's jaw clenched. "She's not my mistress. We met through a matchmaker. Who's conveniently your aunt." Patricia's tone was sympathetic but firm. "Brian, I'm trying to help you. But this narrative, it's damaging. We need damage control. A statement saying it was a misunderstanding, that you've parted ways professionally and personally." "No." Silence fell over the room. "No." Victor repeated. "Brian, be reasonable. I said no." He stood, planting his hands on the table. "I'm not issuing a statement. I'm not denying anything. And I'm sure as hell not walking away from her because it's inconvenient for our image." "This isn't about convenience," Carlos said quietly. "It's about survival. The Moretti family is using this to question your judgment. They're whispering that you've gone soft, that you're distracted. There's already been 2 attempts to poach our accounts. Then we fight back. With what leverage? While you're defending a relationship that makes you look weak." The word landed like a blow. Brian rounded on Carlos, his oldest friend, and saw the truth in his eyes. Carlos believed it too. "You think I'm weak for caring about her?" "I think you're compromised." Carlos stood to face him. "I think you're letting emotion cloud your judgment. And in our world that gets people killed. Maybe our world needs to change." "You don't get to change the world, Brian. You play by its rules or you die." "Then maybe I'm tired of playing." The room erupted, voices overlapping, arguments escalating. But through it all, Brian heard his phone buzz. A text from Thomas. "Sir, there's a situation." His blood went cold. "What situation?" "Miss Brooks. She's at the mansion. There was an incident." Brian was moving before anyone could stop him, leaving the boardroom in chaos, taking the stairs 3 at a time to the main house. He found Bianca in his living room, surrounded by his staff, his housekeeper, his chef, his personal assistant. They stood in a loose semicircle, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. And in the center, Victoria Castellano, his former fiancée, holding court. "There you are, darling," Victoria purred, every inch the society queen she'd become. "I was just getting acquainted with your new help." Bianca stood rigid, her eyes blazing but her voice controlled. "I'm not the help anymore. He fired me, remember?" "Oh, sweetie." Victoria's smile was poisonous. "You'll always be the help. That's what girls like you are." "Victoria." Brian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Get out. I'm trying to save you from yourself." She turned to him, and he saw calculated manipulation in every line of her face. "Do you know what they're saying about you? That you've lost your mind. That you're having a sordid affair with the maid. Your reputation is in ruins, Brian. Your father would be ashamed. My father is dead. And you lost the right to invoke him when you walked out." "I walked out because I valued my life." Victoria's mask slipped, showing genuine anger beneath. "Because loving you meant living in fear. But I still cared about you. Still do. So I'm here to tell you, end this. Now. Before she destroys everything you've built." "She's not destroying anything. Isn't she?" Victoria looked at Bianca with undisguised contempt. "Look at her. She doesn't belong in your world. She never will. And eventually, you'll realize that. You'll realize she's just another liability, another weakness to exploit. And when your enemies come for her, and they will, you'll have to choose. Her life or your empire." "That's enough." Bianca's voice shook but held steady. "You need to leave." "I don't take orders from the help." "You do now." Brian moved to stand beside Bianca, a united front. "Because she's right. You need to leave." "And Victoria?" He met her eyes, cold and final. "Don't come back. Whatever we were, it's over. It's been over for 12 years. The only reason you're here now is because you can't stand that I might be happy with someone who isn't you." Victoria's face flushed with rage and embarrassment. "You'll regret this." "The only thing I regret is wasting years mourning something that was never real." She left in a flurry of expensive perfume and wounded pride, slamming the door behind her. The staff dispersed quickly, leaving Brian and Bianca alone in the echoing silence. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No." Her voice was tight. "I'm not okay. That woman just told me, in front of your entire staff, that I don't belong. That I'm a liability. That I'm going to get you killed. And the worst part." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "The worst part is she might be right." "Bianca." You froze, Brian. The accusation was quiet but devastating. When she was standing there humiliating me, you froze. Just like at the restaurant when your world was watching. And I saw it, that split second where you calculated the cost. Where you wondered if I was worth it. That's not true. Isn't it? She backed away from him. Be honest. In that boardroom, when they told you to walk away, did you consider it? Even for a second? He wanted to lie. Wanted to tell her he never wavered. But she'd asked for honesty, for equal ground. Yes, he admitted. For 1 second, I considered it. Because I'm scared, Bianca. Scared of what being with me will cost you. Scared that Victoria's right. That I can't protect you from my world. scared that I'll be the reason you get hurt worse than you already have been. So you were going to make that choice for me? Decide what I can handle. No, He stopped, hearing the truth in her words. Yes, maybe. I don't know. You're doing it again. Fresh tears fell. Managing the situation. Trying to control the outcome. But Brian, you can't protect me from everything. And you can't make my choices for me, no matter how scared you are. I know. Do you? Her voice cracked. Because I just watched you calculate whether I'm worth the trouble. And I need to know, right now, no hedging, no pretty words, am I? Am I worth facing your board, your world, your past? Am I worth the risk? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Brian looked at this woman who'd walked through fire for a chance at being seen. Who'd faced his world's cruelty with dignity. Who demanded he be brave when every instinct told him to retreat. And he made his choice. Yes, he said, his voice raw but certain. You're worth everything. The risk, the chaos, the cost. All of it. But Bianca, I need you to understand what that means. It means enemies who'll use you to hurt me. It means a spotlight that never turns off. It means fighting battles you didn't sign up for. And his voice broke. I can't promise I'll always get it right. Can't promise I won't freeze when I should fight, or control when I should trust. I'm learning how to do this, how to let someone in, and I'm going to mess it up sometimes. I know. She was crying openly now. But Brian, I need you to fight for us. Not just for me, for us. When your world tells you I don't belong, when they calculate my worth against your empire, I need to know you'll choose me. Not because I'm asking you to, but because you believe I'm worth choosing. I do. Then prove it. The words were a challenge and a plea. Go back to that boardroom. Tell them the truth, that I'm not a liability or a scandal or a mistake. Tell them I'm the woman you're choosing, and anyone who can't accept that can leave. No hedging, no corporate speak. Just truth. They'll fight me. Let them. I could lose everything. Then you'll know what I've been risking this whole time. Her eyes blazed through her tears. Because I've already lost my privacy, my safety, my home. I've risked everything for a chance at this. Now it's your turn. Brian felt the weight of the choice settle on his shoulders. In the silence, he heard his father's voice. Power is control. Love is weakness. Choose the empire. But he also heard Bianca humming in the cabin, felt her hand in his, remembered the man he'd wanted to be before the world taught him to disappear. Okay, he said. Okay. I'll do it. But Bianca, if I do this, if I choose you publicly, there's no going back. My world will never accept you easily. This fight, it doesn't end today. I know. She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. But at least we'll be fighting together. As equals. Isn't that what we promised? He covered her hand with his, feeling his heart hammer against their joined palms. Yeah, he whispered. That's what we promised. Then he kissed her, fierce and desperate and real, before turning to walk back into the boardroom and burn down everything he'd built for a chance at something true. The boardroom fell silent when Brian returned. Carlos looked up, wary and tired. Well, Victor demanded. Have you come to your senses? Yes. Brian remained standing, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I have. Which is why I'm here to tell you that Bianca Brooks is not a scandal to manage. She's the woman I'm choosing. If that's a problem for any of you, there's the door. The room exploded with objections, but Brian raised his hand, and something in his expression silenced them. For 20 years, I've built this empire on fear and control. I've sacrificed every soft thing in my life because I believed that's what power required. And you know what? I was wrong. Power built on fear is just another kind of prison. I've been locked in mine long enough. This is suicide, Patricia said. The optics alone. The optics are that I'm a human being capable of love. If our investors can't handle that, find new investors. He looked at each person in turn. I'm not walking away from her. Not now, not ever. So you have a choice. Accept that and move forward, or leave. But I'm done pretending to be the man my father wanted me to be instead of the man I actually am. Carlos stood slowly. And who's that? The man you actually are. Someone who's tired of disappearing. Someone who wants to build something real instead of just maintaining an empire. Brian's voice softened. Someone who's finally brave enough to choose love over fear. Love. Victor scoffed. You barely know this woman. I've watched her for 3 years without seeing her. I've seen her face cruelty with dignity. I've seen her risk everything for authenticity. And yes, he paused, letting the truth settle. I love her. Maybe I've been falling in love with her all along, too blind and scared to admit it. The words hung in the air, undeniable and irreversible. Patricia exchanged glances with Victor, then sighed. If we're going to do this, we need a strategy. Public appearances. A carefully crafted narrative. No narratives. Just truth. Brian's tone brooked no argument. We issue a simple statement. Bianca and I met through a mutual connection. We're seeing each other, and my personal life is not up for debate. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The Morettas will use this. Let them try. Something dangerous flickered in Brian's eyes. I've spent 2 decades playing nice because I thought that's what civilization required. But if they come after her, they'll remember why people fear my name. Carlos studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. There you are, he said quietly. The man who built this empire. Not your father's son, you. I was starting to think we'd lost you. You almost did. Brian met his oldest friend's eyes. But she found me. So I'm asking, as my friend, not my second, help me protect this. Help me build something that doesn't require me to sacrifice my humanity. Carlos was quiet, weighing decades of loyalty against the impossible request. Finally, he nodded. Okay. But on one condition. You bring her in. No more hiding her away. No more separate worlds. If she's choosing this life, she needs to understand it completely. Meet the people, see the business, know exactly what she's signing up for. Agreed. Brian felt something loosen in his chest. Anyone else? One by one, the board members nodded. Some reluctantly, some with resignation, but all accepting the new reality. All except Victor, who stood and straightened his jacket. I've known you since you were a boy, Brian. Watched you grow into your father's heir. But this. He shook his head. This is weakness. And weakness gets people killed in our world. I'm out. I'm sorry to hear that. Brian extended his hand. Thank you for your years of service. Victor stared at the offered hand, then turned and left without taking it. The door closed with finality. Well, Patricia said into the silence, I guess we're doing this. Someone call PR. We have a statement to craft. As the meeting devolved into logistics and strategy, Carlos pulled Brian aside. You sure about this? He asked quietly. Once you go public, once you put her in the spotlight, there's no protecting her from it. She'll be a target. I know. And you think she can handle it? Brian thought about Bianca standing up to Victoria, facing the media's cruelty, demanding equality when he offered protection. I think she's stronger than anyone gives her credit for. Including me. He met Carlos's eyes. I'm not trying to protect her anymore. I'm trying to stand beside her. There's a difference. Carlos clapped him on the shoulder. Then go tell her. Before she decides we've convinced you to run. Brian left the boardroom and found Bianca exactly where he'd left her, staring out the window at his manicured gardens. She turned when she heard him approach, her expression guarded. Well, I told them. He crossed to her, taking her hands. I told them you're not a scandal or a liability. That I'm choosing you. That anyone who can't accept that can leave. And Victor left. The others stayed. We're issuing a statement. Simple, honest, no corporate spin. Just the truth. She searched his face, looking for doubt. What did it cost you? Telling them? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. He squeezed her hands. But it felt like the first honest thing I've done in 20 years. So thank you. For what? For making me brave enough to choose. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. You're sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, I'm sure. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I love you, Bianca Brooks. I should have said it in the cabin, should have said it 100 times before now. But I'm saying it now. I love you. And I'm choosing you. Every day, for as long as you'll have me. She let out a sob that was half laugh, half cry. I love you too. God help me, I love you too. They held each other in the fading afternoon light. Two people who'd been invisible learning to exist fully, messily, bravely in the light. 3 months later. The restaurant, Bella Notte, the same one where it all began, buzzed with its usual Saturday evening crowd. But tonight, two people walked through the doors with their heads high and their hands clasped together. The maitre d' smiled warmly. Mr. Cross, Ms. Brooks. Your table is ready. Bianca squeezed Brian's hand as they walked through the restaurant. Some people stared. Some whispered. But most simply returned to their meals, accepting what had once seemed impossible. The media storm had raged for weeks before finally dying down to occasional tabloid mentions. Bianca's apartment had been repaired, though she rarely stayed there anymore. She'd found a new job, at a non-profit Carlos had connected her with, working with families facing medical debt. Equal ground, earned on her own merit. Brian's empire had weathered the scandal. Some investors left. New ones came. The Morettas had tested him once, learned quickly that his love for Bianca hadn't made him soft, just more focused on what mattered. They sat at the same corner table, and Brian couldn't help but smile at the symmetry. What? Bianca asked, radiant in a dress she'd bought herself, emerald this time, not borrowed blue. Just thinking about the last time we were here. How terrified we both were. I'm still terrified sometimes, she admitted. Your world is intense. Too intense. No. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Just right. Because you're in it with me. As my partner, not my protector. Equal ground. Always. They ordered wine and dinner, talking and laughing like any couple in love. And they were deeply, messily, imperfectly in love. Halfway through the meal, Brian pulled a small box from his pocket. Bianca's eyes widened. Brian. Wait. He opened it, revealing not a ring but a key. Before you panic, this isn't a proposal. It's an invitation. To the cabin. I had it renovated, kept the books and the fireplace, but made it livable. It's yours now. Well, ours. A place where we can disappear together when the world gets too loud. Bianca's eyes filled with tears. You renovated our cabin? Our cabin, he confirmed. Where you taught me to dance. Where we stopped being invisible. Seemed like it should be ours officially. She took the key, holding it like something precious. I love you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last 10 minutes. I was starting to worry. She laughed, that beautiful sound that still made his heart stutter. I love you, Brian Cross. Thank you for seeing me. For choosing me. For being brave enough to let me see you. Thank you for demanding to be seen. For not letting me hide. He raised his glass. To equal ground? To equal ground. She clinked her glass against his. And to love that refuses to disappear. They drank, and Brian felt something he'd thought impossible. Peace. Not the artificial peace of control, but the real peace of being fully known and still chosen. So, Bianca said, a mischievous glint in her eye. When are you actually going to propose? Because I've been waiting 3 months, and I'm starting to think you're stalling. He nearly choked on his wine. You want me to propose? Eventually. When you're ready. When we're ready. She grinned. But Brian? I'm already yours. Have been since you asked me to dance in that cabin. The ring is just a formality. Is that so? That's so. He laughed, a real laugh, full and unguarded, and pulled another box from his pocket. This one held a ring. Bianca gasped. You sneaky. Bianca Brooks. He stood, moving around the table to kneel beside her chair. The restaurant went quiet, people stopping to watch. 3 months ago, you walked into this restaurant and changed my life. You demanded I see you, and in doing so, you taught me how to see myself. You made me brave. You made me real. You made me want to be the man I'd forgotten I could be. Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. I don't have pretty words or smooth speeches. But I have this. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring. And I have a promise. I promise to choose you every day. To stand beside you, not above you. To be brave when I'm scared, honest when I'm tempted to hide, and present when I'm tempted to disappear. I promise to love you. Messily, imperfectly, completely. So, Bianca Brooks, will you marry me? She pulled him up and kissed him before he could finish, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. The restaurant erupted in applause. Brian slipped the ring on her finger, and it fit perfectly. Like everything between them, it had required patience and courage to get right, but now it was exactly as it should be. They settled back at their table, Bianca admiring her ring while Brian paid the bill with hands that trembled slightly. Scared? She teased. Terrified. Good. Me too. She laced her fingers through his. But we'll be terrified together. That's the deal. Best deal I've ever made. They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking out into the city night. Photographers still lurked occasionally, but they'd learned to live with it, the cost of choosing each other publicly. As they climbed into the car where Thomas waited with a knowing smile, Bianca leaned against Brian's shoulder. Take us to the cabin, Thomas, Brian said. We have some celebrating to do. The cabin, sir? Tonight. Tonight. And Thomas? Take the long way. We're in no hurry. As the car pulled away, Brian looked down at Bianca. His maid, his blind date, his equal, his love. The woman who'd refused to stay invisible and demanded he do the same. Thank you, he whispered into her hair. For what? For saving me. She pulled back to look at him, fierce and tender all at once. We saved each other. That's what love does. It makes you brave enough to stop disappearing. What's the bravest choice you've ever made for love? Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it. And as the car carried them toward their cabin, toward their future, toward all the messy, beautiful, terrifying possibilities of love, neither Brian nor Bianca felt invisible anymore. They felt seen, chosen, and finally, after years of hiding, completely wonderfully alive. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.